This is a collection of some of the scariest and most interesting stories from the internet. I've never read any of these on my channel, but if you've heard any of these, I will be leaving timestamps for each story in the description and pinned comment just in case you want to skip past any. Now that that's out of the way, I hope you enjoyed the video and let's begin. This took place 10 years ago when I was a freshman in college. This is the first time I've ever recounted this story in full detail to anyone. I attended college in a rural mountain area in the Northeast, a small school tucked away in the rolling hills of the mountains, the type of place where the beauty and casual grace of nature is juxtaposed by the ugliness of humanity. The newspaper was ultra-conservative, and you couldn't go too deep into the woods beyond a few trees without seeing some trace of meth activity. You know the type of place I mean. Anyway, one of my new friends from college discovered somehow an abandoned train trestle deep into the woods about 5 miles from campus, basically in no man's land. I have no idea and don't remember how he found this place because it was very much off the path. The trestle crossed above a river which placidly flowed about 40 feet below. It was actually quite beautiful, and we began going there maybe 3 times a week. Just hanging out on the trestle, watching the water below and the open sky above. We'd drink 40s there, smoke a bowl there, bring some girls there, you know, stuff like that. Eventually, we began jumping off the trestle into the water below and then climbing back up. It was just a very college-y thing to do. Our chill spot, basically. So, one day, just needing to get away from the dorms and away from it all, I decided to go by myself to the trestle for a swim. It was about 7 p.m., so I still had a good hour or so of dim sunlight, and I brought a flashlight for the walk home when I was sure it would be dark. I made the trek through the pathways of the woods as I had done 100 times before, left my towel and flashlight on the trestle and jumped into the water. The water was about 10 to 15 feet deep, I'd say. It flowed almost imperceptibly. You might as well be swimming in a stagnant pool. However, about maybe 50 yards away from the trestle, the river narrows and the current picks up significantly. Then about 20 yards after that, there is a maybe 20-foot high waterfall that bubbles and splashes with extreme violence. We used to watch large objects go over and never come back up again. So there I am, dimly bobbing my head in and out of the water, doing underwater flips, etc. When I pop my head out of the water, I happen to glance to the side of the river and see a man walking towards the water. The water is kind of impeding my view, so I don't see him fluidly walking towards the water. I more see him in different stages of being closer to the water, like flipping through a flip book. He's 15 feet away. 10 feet away, 5 feet away. I can barely give you a description. Maybe 6 feet tall, pale, skinny, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. What I do remember most about his appearance was the extremely empty look on his face and in his eyes, like he was doing something mundane, like taking out the trash or raking leaves. I'm treading water, not knowing what to think, and I see that he is no longer beside the river. He dove in, and he's swimming pin straight directly at me so fast. I try to swim the opposite way, but within a minute I feel him grab my ankle and tug. I tried to scream, but water filled my mouth. While I'm underwater, he lets go and goes up for air, then grabs back on and pulls me again. It seems like he's done this before, and I never once saw him after he jumped into the water. He's gradually pulling me to where the current picks up before the waterfall. I start to realize this and just start fucking flipping out. I'm kicking, screaming, cursing to no effect. Finally, I feel the current start to take me and I twist away towards the waterfall. I look back and I see this fucking guy just casually swimming back to where he jumped into the water, not even looking at me. This is by far the scariest moment of my life as I approach the waterfall. Long story short, I go over and I'm underwater for a long time, over a minute. The water above unrelentingly pushing me under. The only reason I survived was there was a large log that had gone over, and I grabbed it and used the leverage against the bottom to push me away from the crushing water. I survived, obviously, but then I had to trek the miles back to my dorm in the dark without my flashlight, every step of the way thinking he would come back to finish the job. The next year, a football player drowned going over that fall. The news said it was because there was an extreme current due to the recent rainfall, but I've always wondered about that. Before I start, here's a bit of context to my story. My husband and I lived in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side of the house, which opens up into the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto a long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of our house so that he could use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door in our laundry room, but we noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him out through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to bed. I hook him up to his line, close the door, and lock it before heading into the kitchen to put away the dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around along the front and side of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door, which is how my dog signals that he wants to come back inside, so I head over to let him back in. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch, this one louder than the last. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock and I run to grab my cell phone. I call my husband to tell him what's happening. He was very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well, but he says that he's heading home. This is when I realize my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door, trying to make as little noise as possible to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed, looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere and the side of my house is covered in gravel, so I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep an eye on the stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel like they would take me seriously, since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take pictures of the peephole and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show his taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds. With that, he turns around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. But luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes. Long story short, he convinced me to call the police and we went out looking for our dog. It turns out that this man had cut the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided that this was a good time for him to explore my neighbor's backyard, which was where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened, and we've since moved to a new house for unrelated reasons, and the police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down. This happened in the fall of 1993 when I was 20 years old. In the interest of context, this was before I started college and I was working in the material prep department of a plastics factory on the night shift. I was the only woman in the department and my male coworkers were initially skeptical that I could handle the job. But I proved myself and earned their respect. It was hard work, but on the plus side, it put me in the best shape of my life. It was also about the same time that I dumped my abusive boyfriend. He was verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, as well as an alcoholic. This fact, more than anything, is probably why I got myself into this situation in the first place. I had just gotten off work and it was about 1:30 a.m. My car was practically running on fumes, so I stopped at a local gas station to fill up. While I was pumping gas, a woman about my age approached me looking nervous and scared. She said that she'd been at her boyfriend's house and that they'd gotten into a fight. She said she'd walked to the gas station to use the payphone and call a friend to pick her up. On her way to the station, a car pulled up as she was walking and the guys inside started catcalling and harassing her. With a slight movement of her head, she indicated a car that was parked off to the side by the gas station dumpsters. I saw a large, light green car like a Caddy or Lincoln, with at least 2 or 3 shadowy figures inside. She said they threatened her and that she was too scared to call her friend and wait. The woman was neat, well-dressed, and didn't seem high or drunk or anything like that. She just seemed really nervous and freaked out, so I didn't even hesitate. I finished pumping my gas and told her to hop in the car and that I'd take her home. At that time on a weeknight, there was very little traffic, so I booked it right out of the gas station and asked her where she lived. She kept twisting around in the seat to see if the car was behind us. And when I asked her to put her seatbelt on, she ignored me and kept looking for the car. I assumed she was just scared. A few blocks down the road, however, I noticed she was looking around the car, and she started asking me about money, saying things like, "Where's your purse? Where's your bag? I need money. You need to give me some money." My stomach sank. I have this woman in my car, and now she's gonna rob me. Fuck. But when I thought about it, robbery just didn't make much sense. I was driving a 1985 Chevette, affectionately nicknamed Shitbox, and was wearing my work clothes, a ratty t-shirt and jeans with combat boots. I did not look like a person with a lot of cash, primarily because I wasn't a person with a lot of cash. She twisted around in the seat again and started yelling, "There they are," over and over again. She didn't sound scared anymore. I checked the rear view and sure enough, the light green car is right behind me. She started cackling and bouncing up and down in the seat. "My boys are gonna fuck you up, bitch. They're gonna fuck you up." She's laughing like crazy, opening the glove box, looking in the back for a bag or purse, and telling me all this messed up shit these guys are planning to do to me. Now, if I had been smart, I would have just driven to the police station. Actually, if I had been very smart, I would have just called the cops from the gas station and waited with her until they arrived. That would have been the intelligent thing to do. Unfortunately, none of this crossed my mind until later. In the moment, I just got really fucking angry. I realized 3 key things all at once. 1, there was an intersection up ahead with cars on either side waiting to cross, and the light had just turned yellow. 2, I had a spare box cutter that I kept for work in the driver's side door compartment. 3, the crazy bitch still hadn't put on her seatbelt. I didn't think. I floored it and passed under the yellow light just as it turned red. I glanced back to see if the green car was still behind me, but the cross traffic at the intersection had started to move, and they hadn't caught up. The bitch started yelling. I slammed on the brakes and she hit the dash and windshield with a solid and viciously satisfying crack. When she rebounded to the passenger seat, I had the box cutter in her face and was screaming some seriously bat-crazy shit. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, "Get the fuck out! Get the fuck out of my car before I cut off your face and make you eat it, bitch!" The crazy screaming and box cutter combo worked. She grabbed blindly at the handle and popped the door open, and I started shoving and punching her until she tumbled out of the door to the curb. I stomped on the gas, got to the next turn, and squealed around it with the passenger door still open. I made a few more turns because I was afraid that the green car might catch up to me. After a little while, I stopped to close the passenger door, and then I cut across town and got on the highway to get home. I was only on the highway for about 5 minutes before the shake started. I pulled off to the shoulder to calm down and get my shit together, and then I drove home. I told my older sister, who I had been living with temporarily after the whole breakup thing, everything that happened. She wrapped me in a tight bear hug while simultaneously yelling about how stupid I was for not going to the police. I've never been so glad to be yelled at in my life. To give some explanation and background knowledge for this whole encounter, I was around 15 at the time this occurred. I was camping out in the middle of nowhere with my family and part of my extended family, my aunt, uncle, and cousins. I was the oldest kid there in the RV, so you can probably understand how it felt to have no one else there to do the stupid crap I did back then with. With a good 2-year gap between me and the inferiors, it was almost like nirvana when I got to the campground and met the other teenagers. These were all people we knew fairly well from previous camping trips, so it was considered normal to hit it off with them from the start, and act like we've known each other forever within the hour. Now, this story. So my parents trusted me a lot. I liked my fun, but I liked getting home in time for dinner equally as much. So when I was gone most of the day with other people from the camp, they didn't think much of it. The only rule was that I had to be back at the RV to eat dinner, and before 8:30 p.m. So picture this, right? Group of 6 teenagers, 15 to 16 years old, out in the middle of the woods with no adult supervision for the vast majority of the day. Just a recipe for success right there. But this particular day, we found a neat little deer trail we hadn't found in the 2 years we'd been there before. On second thought, though, it didn't really seem like a deer trail. It snaked through a really thick part of the underbrush, maybe a foot of clear ground, and 3.5 feet clear of branches going upwards. It's a really hard thing to pick out of the brush, unless you're either really looking or know where it is. It was promptly explored, marked with a broken branch outside of the entrance, and quickly forgotten. Except I remembered this special little tunnel. That night, while we were all eating dinner, one of the adults proposed that we played manhunt out in the woods at night. Not everyone was totally on board with this idea, but in the grand scheme of the plan, they were quashed down like autumn leaves. Everyone got a flashlight, and everyone was assigned to a team. For those of you who aren't sure what manhunt is, here's an explanation. Everyone playing is given a flashlight, and they're divided into 2 groups. It's basically like glorified flashlight tag, but there's a catch. As you catch people, you have to correctly identify who they are. And if you can, they join forces with the hunters. The last man standing gets a candy bar or something, whatever is being offered as the prize. That's how we played it anyway. For the first round, I get lumped in with the runners, those who are getting chased by the hunters. We get a 5-minute head start to run, climb a tree, whatever the hell we want to do to evade the hunters. Usually I'm the one up in the tree, but that never really worked out as being the winning spot. So to try and score a win for once, I decide to try what I think will be a surefire method of winning. And the hiding spot was the rude little path through the thicket. It took most of the head start time to find the damn thing because it was so well hidden and out of the way. As I passed hiding spots, I heard hushed, smothered whispering between siblings who were questioning my actions. It should be noted that I have bat hearing, and my ears are possibly my greatest asset in this game. But when I'm just reaching the destination, I hear the short blast of the air horn announcing that the 5 minutes are up. I swan dove into this minute little path in the undergrowth, shuffling on my hands and knees until I'm about halfway in, crouching down like some huge malformed quail. The hunters are doing an initial sweep through the trails, looking for obvious hiders and people caught out trying to change spots. When they finally reach me, they reach the dead end and go straight back. I try to readjust myself and crawl further down the tunnel. I honestly don't know how it happened, but I found an even more hidden path within that one. And accidentally, I dragged my stupid body down the rabbit hole. Except instead of ending in a dead end, this one ended in a slight hollow. I don't ever want to describe exactly what I found there. I'm sorry, but I just can't. It was a younger looking woman, naked, covered in lacerations and stab wounds in the fetal position. Her glassy, glazed eyes seemed to look straight through me. I won't go any further than that. I was too scared to scream, and I froze there while dark burgundy stains formed on my jeans. I was sitting there, frozen, and then I heard someone else coming along the path. Have you ever been so scared that for one moment, one insane moment, you truly consider something incredibly stupid as a viable option to escape? That was one of those times. I let out a short, trembling whisper and started moving. Whoever was on the path stopped and then eagerly started moving forward again. I could hear the panting, uneven breaths of a man. A horrible marker of whoever it was getting closer and closer to me by the second. By some wondrous, beautiful miracle, he missed the path leading to the brushy hollow. I heard him moving down past the entrance, dragging something clunky and awkward behind him. I heard clinking noises and the occasional effort to silence the small, sharp noises. I heard a low curse somewhere towards the end of the tunnel, and I blasted out of the undergrowth tunnel like a bullet forcing its way out of a barrel. Cracks, crashes, and obnoxious rustling was all around me as I heard the man sharply intake a breath and begin to move towards me. The deep panting was getting closer and closer to me. I thought I was going to be too slow at exiting, but somehow, I exploded out of the entrance, got onto my wobbly, half-asleep legs, and started booking it down the trail. The unknown pursuer was close behind me for a bit, but it seemed like he was too exhausted to chase me at that same speed for long. I know everyone loves to rip on the fact that people always trip in horror movies, but in all honesty, tripping is something I am amazed I didn't do. With adrenaline coursing through me at the speed of Usain Bolt, trying to keep my jello-like legs to move me away from whoever was behind me was like trying to run on water. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached the main trail running back to the camp, and sprinted down it screaming bloody murder. Confused faces looked out from the trees, and I think someone called after me. Reaching the camp was easy, but trying to explain why I woke up half the people in the camp and bolted out of the woods at breakneck speed was harder. When I finally choked the words out to explain, I remember a profound, insidious silence throughout the group of adults waiting at the mouth of the trail. I really don't remember a whole lot from that point on. I do know that the cops were called, and my mother and aunt ran shrieking and wailing along the trail, calling for the other kids to come back to safety. When someone's yelling like that, you don't ignore it. They rounded everyone up in 30 seconds flat and barreled back into the camp. The police found a man out in the woods, creeping along the trail, clutching a knife. A black garbage bag with a plethora of sharp objects and a saw was found abandoned on the trail. Some were speckled and smeared with dried blood. I don't think there's really any getting over it. I still have nightmares sometimes of the man chasing me, breathing heavily down the back of my neck, trying to catch me. Sometimes he succeeds. So, this is a story that happened to my mom's friend in Korea about 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul, South Korea. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the day. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got onto the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy, and she made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other lit number. And on top of that, she noticed that he was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend like she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" And making it seem like her husband was waiting for her at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on the 12th floor or something, she quickly got off, grabbed her daughter, and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and was shouting things like, "Hey, I'm home, please open the door," and kind of pretended like her husband was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open her door's passcode thing. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea. And she started to frantically put in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make noise, so the man knew that no one was going to answer the door for her. And he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend, at this point, was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door. But she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or a weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news and there was a coverage on the capture of a serial killer named Yoo Young-chul, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the too familiar yellow raincoat and hat that he was wearing when apprehended. So that's the story about how my mom's friend was almost killed by a serial killer. I'll leave his Wikipedia page in the description for anyone who's curious. When I was 19, I worked for a company that allocated labor to rural areas of Australia. Basically what you did was tell them when you were available and they'd send you to a remote farm for a few weeks where you do whatever they needed done. It was hard work and long hours, but good pay and good fun if you got in with a nice group of workers. When this occurred, I was working on a large property. I was told it covered roughly the same landmass as the entire state of Maryland. It was about 9 hours from Sydney City, and the property itself was about 40 minutes from the nearest town. In short, it was in the middle of nowhere. I was working at the farm clearing bushland with 3 other guys my age from the city. Our boss was a guy named Jeremy who owned the farm and supervised us while helping out with the work. He was pretty laid back and was generally really good to us. This summer in particular was very hot, and the work was hard. So one day when the temperature hit above 38 degrees Celsius, which is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Jeremy decided to give us the afternoon off. He said he knew of a water hole on the farm about a 25-minute drive north. I was keen for a swim, but the other guys just wanted to relax for the arvo. So him and I hopped in one of the work trucks and started heading across the property. It was mostly wide, empty expanses with a few clumps of scattered bushland. Jeremy wasn't much of a talker, so we drove more or less in silence. After about 20 minutes, however, he suddenly perked up and jabbed me in the ribs. "Do you see that over there? Below the 2 dead trees?" I should mention here that if you're not familiar with inland areas, particularly those in Australia, they're brown or red and mostly flat and bland, meaning any bright colors stick out like a sore thumb. So you can imagine our surprise when we could see a large blue angular structure far off in the distance. We steered in its direction, and as we got closer, we realized it was a huge blue shipping container just sitting in the middle of nowhere. Jeremy was perplexed, and I asked him if he knew what it was, but he obviously didn't. He said that he hadn't seen it when he drove through the same area about 5 weeks before and that he wanted to go see what it was. Initially, we pulled to a stop about 100 meters away from it. At this stage, I had a really bad feeling. The whole thing wasn't right. It's hard to explain, but if you can imagine seeing such a foreign object in the middle of a huge barren expanse, it had to be something weird. Jeremy, however, wanted to investigate, which I understood given that it was his property, but to tell the truth, I was really anxious. As we got closer, things got even more bizarre. There was a big diesel generator behind it thumping away and a CCTV camera on each side. All of them were motion activated, so they buzzed from side to side, following us as we moved around. I tried to reason with Jeremy, something along the lines of, "Look, with all this security, someone obviously doesn't want us here, let's just go." He brushed me off, however, reminding me that it was his farm and whoever had put this here was trespassing, so he wanted to go inside. Despite all the surveillance, there was only a small padlock on the huge door. We had some bolt cutters in his toolbox, and after a bit of struggle, we broke the lock and went inside. The first thing I noticed was the rush of cold air as we got in. The place was air-conditioned, which I must admit was quite pleasant on such a hot day. We searched around for a light switch, but I could already see this was some sort of IT setup. There were flashing LEDs all around the place and the sort of hum you hear when a hard drive is working hard. When we finally switched on the lights, we could see a sophisticated, albeit somewhat cluttered office setup. There were hard drives the size of bar fridges and other computer equipment lining the walls, sometimes piled 2 or 3 high, and plastic storage boxes scattered around the far wall and several desks with computer monitors arranged in the middle, complete with rolling office chairs. At this point, I felt like I was in one of those nonsensical dreams. This made absolutely no sense. We wandered into the middle and sat down at one of the desks to see if the computers would give us any idea of what the hell was going on here. My heart was racing and I just wanted to bolt. We had been seen by the CCTV, so if anyone was monitoring, they would know that we were here. Jeremy, on the other hand, was adamant that we had to get to the bottom of this. So I put on a brave face and started looking through the computer. This went on for a while, but in short, neither of us had a very high grasp of technology outside of Facebook and Microsoft Word. The best I can describe it from my lay position is that it was endless lists of computer talk. It was like what the old Napster or LimeWire download screens looked like. Just constantly picking up and receiving data, then recording it on several windows. I gave up on the computers and walked cautiously over the far end of the container to the big pile of storage boxes. By then, I was pretty sure no one else was there, as there was nowhere to hide really. But I was still incredibly on edge. I decided, against my better judgment, to see what was inside all these boxes. My brief look through this box still makes me feel sick to my stomach. It didn't take long for me to realize that this box was full of posters, DVDs, and photos, all of hardcore child pornography. One thing that still gets to me is that it was all neatly ordered into folders and smaller boxes. These people were organized. I immediately recoiled, jumped up, and ran over to Jeremy. I could hardly string a sentence together. I said something along the lines of, "Mate, get out, child sex, go, get the fuck up." I dragged him out, composed myself, and managed to explain what I saw. We jumped back into the truck and sped back to the house. The farm had no mobile phone reception, and we hadn't bought the satellite phone, so we had to get back to the landline to call the police. Once we called them, they still had to make it all the way to the farm from the nearest police station, which was in a town about a half hour from the closest town to the farm. As I mentioned before, we were in the middle of nowhere. We waited, talking frantically about what we'd seen, until the cops arrived almost an hour later. They arrived with 2 4-wheel drives and we jumped in and led them back. This is where it gets worse. By the time we got back, the container door was open and there was a fire inside. We only had 2 small extinguishers in the cars, and these did very little. The fire department took an hour to get there, but by then most of the damage was already done. An arson report by the federal police found almost no evidence of the computer equipment described. This means that whoever ran it knew we were there and had time to come and remove most of it and get away. There were various ways to get off the property, and the landmass was huge, so there was no real way to tail them. Since the police hadn't taken us all too seriously in the first instance, probably due to our poor explanation on the phone, Aerial surveillance was also impossible by the time we had pieced it all together. I took a keen interest in following it up, but with no real evidence of who might be responsible, the investigation went cold. I've kept in contact with Jeremy, and the shipping container is still sitting there on the farm, as it's too expensive to move. I'll never forget what I saw in those boxes. To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago, and I still haven't been able to even begin to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town I had previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends who lived several hours away. Before I continue, I'll give a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house. One on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, which did have a lock and floor-length curtains for privacy, and another door on the other side of the wall from my bedroom which led into the garage and basement. When you walk out of my bedroom and turn, you could see all the way across the house, past the kitchen, living room, dining area, to the door of my parents' bedroom and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a few days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely, and that they were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I'd locked all the doors in the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m. and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer when suddenly I got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my stiflingly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once removing the fan, shutting and locking the window, and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I lay back in bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it, so I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped and everything returned to silence, so I figured that I was probably right and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived because after the scratching stopped, from the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds, wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my bedroom window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had just gone through. So I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek out around the corner. And if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house before creeping around the corner and looking to see if it was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over at the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse? He wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs, he was fucking crawling up them like like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized that it was locked, in a sickeningly sweet sing-song voice, he said, "I know you're in there." This was followed by a loud cackle, and what I could only imagine was him throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot, and I was sure that I'd hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy and ringing the bell over and over again. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbors to let me in, and I swear to fucking God, I thought I could see the man standing at my window waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to the basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but of course they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house. He was just some psycho who broke into my house knowing that I was home. I hope I never see him again.